How well do you really know the people living under your roof? Claire Morgan had never liked silence. It reminded her of all the things she couldn't say. About her lonely marriage, her empty evenings, and the man she was slowly losing to distance. The house in Maplewood was quiet that night. Too quiet. Only the soft hum of the refrigerator broke through the stillness. She glanced at the clock. 1:58 a.m. Richard was away again. Another business trip that stretched into the weekend. She told herself not to think too much. He was probably just busy, but deep down, Claire knew. Love wasn't supposed to feel this empty. She washed her cup and turned off the lights. Just as she was heading upstairs, a faint sound stopped her. The clink of glass from the kitchen. Her body froze. It wasn't loud, but enough to make her heart jump. The house was supposed to be empty. Well, almost empty. Ethan was home, her stepson. He had moved back in 3 months ago after dropping out of college. He said he needed time, though he never explained what that meant. Claire tried to be supportive. She cooked for him, asked about his day, pretended the silence between them was just shyness, not distance. But that night, as she stood in the dark hallway, the sound came again, louder this time. She took a deep breath and walked toward the kitchen. The wooden floor creaked beneath her feet. When she turned the corner, her breath caught. Ethan was standing there, barefoot, pale, his hand frozen mid-air. He was holding a torn envelope. "Ethan?" Claire's voice trembled. "What are you doing?" He looked like a child caught stealing cookies, except this wasn't a cookie jar. It was Richard's drawer, the one he always kept locked. I thought it was just bills," Ethan stammered. But Claire's eyes had already fallen on the table. The envelope had spilled open, and something slid halfway out. A photograph. She picked it up before he could stop her. The picture showed Richard, her husband, with a woman Claire didn't recognize. Young, smiling, her hand resting on his shoulder. The background looked like a seaside restaurant. The date printed at the bottom corner made her heart stop. 6 months ago, that was during one of his business trips. She felt the blood rush to her face. "Who is this?" she asked, barely able to breathe. Ethan said nothing. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked toward the floor. "Answer me!" "I don't know," he whispered. "I found it a few days ago. I didn't know how to tell you." Claire stared at him, her husband's son, realizing that the only honest person left in the house might be the one she barely spoke to. She sank into a chair. "Why were you looking through his things?" Ethan hesitated, guilt written all over him. "Because I saw something that didn't feel right. The late-night calls, the sudden trips. I thought maybe I was wrong. But then I found that envelope." Claire's hands trembled. The photo slipped back onto the table. "You should have shown me." "I wanted to," Ethan said quietly. "But how do you tell someone their world might not be real anymore?" The air between them felt heavy. Two strangers suddenly tied together by one secret neither of them wanted. Claire stared at the photo again. The woman looked carefree, her head tilted in laughter. It was the kind of joy Claire hadn't seen in Richard's eyes for months. Her voice broke. "Do you think he's still seeing her?" Ethan didn't answer. His silence was enough. She stood abruptly, pacing the floor. Her mind spun with questions. How long had this been going on? Was it just one woman? Had their entire marriage been a lie? Ethan watched her, his expression torn between guilt and protectiveness. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "You didn't deserve this." Claire turned to him, eyes wet. "No one does." A clock ticked loudly on the wall. The refrigerator hummed. The world kept moving, even as hers fell apart. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the quiet thunder rolling somewhere far outside, hinting at a storm. Finally, Claire whispered, "You can't tell him I know." "Not yet," Ethan frowned. "Why?" "Because I need to hear it from him," she said. "I need to know if he'll tell me the truth." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then what?" "I don't know," she whispered. "But I'll decide when I do." She picked up the photo again and slipped it into the drawer. Then she locked it, just like Richard used to. As she turned to leave, she paused by the door. Ethan was still standing there, guilt written across his face. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not lying to me." He nodded, but something in his eyes, something protective, lingered long after she left. Upstairs, Claire lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Every sound in the house felt louder: the ticking clock, the faint hum of electricity, the weight of truth pressing against her chest. Sleep didn't come. Only questions. Why had Richard lied? Why had Ethan been the one to find out? And why did part of her, the part she didn't want to admit, feel safer knowing Ethan was there? She turned to the window. The storm outside was getting closer, flashes of lightning breaking through the darkness. And in that fleeting light, she saw her reflection. A woman holding herself together while her world silently cracked. Downstairs, the kitchen light flickered once, then went dark. Somewhere in that same house, Ethan sat at the table, staring at the locked drawer, the sound of thunder echoing softly against the glass. He whispered to himself, "It's not over yet." The clock struck 3, and in that moment, neither of them knew it. Their lives had already begun to change, forever. Sometimes the truth doesn't shout, it whispers through a single picture. The next morning felt heavier than usual. The house smelled of coffee, yet it carried a strange tension in the air. Claire moved around the kitchen, pretending to be calm, though her heart hadn't rested since last night. The photo, the envelope, Ethan's pale face, it all replayed in her mind like a movie she couldn't pause. She heard footsteps. Ethan entered quietly, avoiding her eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept either. Claire placed a cup of coffee in front of him, her hand trembling slightly. "We need to talk," she said softly. He nodded, staring at the dark swirl in his cup. "I didn't mean for you to find it that way." Claire took a deep breath. "You said you didn't know who she was. Was that true?" Ethan hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out the same photograph, now creased and smudged. "I looked at it again this morning," he said. "She's not his ex-wife. I checked the date on the back." Claire's eyes darted to the numbers. 6 months ago, she whispered. "That's when he said he was in Denver for a meeting." "Yeah," Ethan said quietly. "But this doesn't look like Denver. That's the coast. Maybe California." Claire's throat went dry. Every business trip, every missed call, every cold night suddenly made sense. "He lied," she said, almost to herself. Ethan looked at her, guilt heavy in his eyes. "I didn't want to tell you until I was sure. But when I saw you last night, I knew you deserved to know." She wanted to thank him, but words felt too small for what she felt. Anger, sadness, relief, and fear, all mixed in one. Claire stood up, pacing. "He'll be home tomorrow. I'll ask him. I'll give him a chance to tell the truth." Ethan frowned. "And if he doesn't?" She met his eyes. "Then I'll know exactly who he is." For a moment, silence filled the room again. That same silence that used to mean peace, but now felt like a storm waiting to break. Claire tried to breathe, to steady herself, but something deep inside told her that nothing would be the same after today. The clock ticked softly. The sound of rain brushed against the window. Ethan finally whispered, "Claire, there's something else." She turned sharply. "What do you mean?" He looked down at the table, his fingers gripping the edge. That photo wasn't the only thing in the envelope. Her heart skipped. "What else was there?" Ethan hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. "There was a hotel receipt. 2 names, his and hers." The mug in Claire's hand slipped slightly, spilling coffee across the counter. Outside, thunder rolled again, louder this time, and before she could ask another question, the sound of a key turning in the front door made her freeze. Richard was home early. What happens when the truth knocks before you're ready to face it? The front door clicked open, and the sound of footsteps filled the hallway. Claire froze, her breath catching in her throat. Ethan's eyes widened. He hadn't expected his father home that early. Richard walked in with his usual smile, suitcase in hand, coat damp from the rain. "Surprise," he said cheerfully. "I finished the conference early," but his smile faded when he saw their faces. Claire stood stiff by the counter. Ethan looked pale, uneasy. The air felt thick, like the calm before lightning strikes. Richard set his suitcase down slowly. "What's wrong?" he asked. Claire tried to speak, but the words caught in her chest. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought he could hear it. Ethan looked at her, then back at his father. "You should tell her," he said quietly. Richard blinked. "Tell her what?" "The truth," Ethan said. "About the woman." Richard's expression changed. A flicker of confusion, then fear. "What woman?" he asked, his voice too calm to be real. Claire reached into the drawer and pulled out the photograph. She placed it on the counter between them. "This woman," she said. The color drained from Richard's face. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the rain tapping against the window. Then he exhaled, long and shaky. "Where did you get that?" Ethan stepped forward. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that you've been lying." Richard's tone sharpened. "Ethan, stay out of this. This is between me and your stepmother." Claire's voice rose, quiet but firm. "No, it's between all of us now." Richard ran a hand through his hair, searching for words. "Her name's Julia," he finally said. "It was a mistake. It ended months ago." Claire stared at him, disbelief flooding her eyes. "A mistake? You called me from hotel rooms with her standing next to you, didn't you?" He looked down. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." Ethan's voice cracked with anger. "You always told me to take responsibility. You can't even look her in the eye." Richard turned on him, voice low. "You don't understand marriage, son. Sometimes things don't." Claire interrupted. "Don't justify betrayal as things. You lied to me, to both of us." For a long second, Richard said nothing. His silence was louder than any confession. Claire's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. She finally whispered, "Pack a bag." Richard's voice broke. "Claire, please." "Now," she said, her tone trembling but final. He stood still, realizing she meant it. Ethan looked at her, shocked but proud. For the first time, she wasn't breaking. She was standing. Richard turned, shoulders slumped, and walked toward the stairs. His footsteps faded slowly. Claire sank into a chair, her hands shaking. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. Neither spoke. Outside, thunder cracked across the sky, loud and sudden, and just as Richard reached the top of the stairs, his phone buzzed on the table beside them. The screen lit up with a message. "Julia, I'm outside." Sometimes the hardest goodbyes are the ones that teach you how to live again. Rain poured down outside, blurring the world beyond the window. Claire sat at the kitchen table, staring at the message glowing on Richard's phone. "Julia, I'm outside." Her heart sank, yet for the first time she wasn't angry. She was just done. The silence stretched, long and heavy, until she finally whispered, "He's not even trying to hide it anymore." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Do you want me to—" "No," Claire interrupted gently. "Let him go." Moments later, Richard came down with his bag. His eyes darted to the phone on the table, then to Claire. There were no tears this time, no arguments left to make. She simply said, "Take it. You'll need it." He picked up the phone, hesitated for a moment, and looked at her. "I didn't mean to hurt you." Claire didn't respond. She just stepped aside, letting him pass. The front door opened and the cold air rushed in. When it closed again, the house felt different, emptier, yet somehow lighter. Ethan stood frozen for a while before finally sitting across from her. Neither spoke. The storm outside began to fade, leaving behind a soft, steady drizzle. How do you rebuild after everything breaks? Days turned into weeks. The papers were signed, the house grew quieter, and Claire started finding pieces of herself again, in small ways. She planted flowers, started painting again, and laughed at things she hadn't noticed before. Ethan stayed. He took small jobs around town, fixed things around the house, and tried not to intrude. But every now and then, Claire would catch him watching her, not out of pity, but concern. One evening, while cooking dinner, she smiled faintly. "You don't have to take care of me, you know." Ethan shook his head. "Maybe I'm not taking care of you. Maybe I just don't want to leave someone who still believes people can be good." Her smile faded into something softer, almost sad. After everything, I still believe that. They ate quietly, the kind of quiet that no longer hurt. Outside, the last light of sunset stretched across the window, golden, peaceful, and full of promise. For the first time, Claire didn't feel trapped by the past. She felt present, alive. She turned to Ethan. "You know," she said, "we didn't lose everything that night. We just found out what was real." He nodded, his eyes warm but unreadable. "And what happens now?" Claire looked toward the front door, the same door Richard had walked out of. The air was still, almost expectant. "Now," she said quietly, "life starts over." Just then, a soft knock came from that very door. Ethan frowned. At this hour, Claire's pulse quickened. She walked over and slowly turned the handle. When the door opened, she froze. Standing there, soaked from the rain, was Julia, holding a small box in her hands. And with one trembling breath, she said, "I think this belongs to you."